Hello, it's Big Cheds. I'm back with another chapter. This is my Battles with Cancer, a candid patient and caregiver's memoir. I am a cancer survivor. I was a patient and a caregiver. I took care of my mother when she was diagnosed, and I beat my cancer. I am a survivor. I published a book in 2020. I republished it in 2023 after publishing two more books, Trading Wisdom and Trading Quotes. I went back and I redid this book to just update it and to improve the writing. And then I recorded the audiobook, and that's available on Audible right now. But the reason I'm doing this is I want the whole book to be available for anyone for free. I want it to help people. That's why I wrote the book. So, here on YouTube at Cheds Trading. I'm Big Cheds on Twitter, of course. I'm reading the book one chapter at a time. We just finished part one with Finally Free. We went through my chemo, my diagnosis, my chemo treatment, my radiation treatment, and now we're starting part two of the book. And this chapter is called Returning to the Scene of the Crime. So let's get right into it. Returning to the scene of the crime. After 3 months had elapsed since my last chemotherapy session, it was time for a follow-up visit with my medical oncologist. As I set off to return to the hospital where I'd received all those treatments, in my mind, it felt like I was returning to the scene of the crime. The drive back into the hospital rekindled the emotional experience of heading there every day for treatment. The buildings and intersections I observed along the way all seemed the same to me, except this time I was different. Now I was looking at them in ways I had not before. After navigating some traffic, I pulled into the parking garage, and this time I opted for the self parking option rather than using the valet. After all, I was no longer a quote unquote patient. With this new sense of self, I was lacking the normal feelings of vulnerability that a deathly sick patient feels when they go to the hospital. Having almost fully recovered from my treatment and feeling otherwise healthy and energetic, I was happy to not feel the need to rely on someone just to park my car. And though that may not seem like a big deal, it meant a lot to me. After taking it all in, I walked over to the front desk to check in, and I was given one of those darn plastic hospital bracelets again. This bracelet was just like the one that I had worn all throughout my chemotherapy and radiation treatments. I had even worn that bracelet in between hospital visits as a way to remind myself that I was a sick patient. And that way, I needed to respect my body by doing as much as I could to take care of myself. The lady at the front desk asked me the same questions I'd been asked for each prior visit, such as, do you have any signs of cough and cold? And do you have a port? I wanted to tell this woman that I was not a patient anymore and that I was just there for a follow-up visit. I wanted her to know that I was not one of those sick and vulnerable cancer patients. I was normal, just like her. Biting my tongue, I went over to the blood drawing area and I waited for my name to be called. And I noticed just how few people were there that day. Normally, at least 40 or 50 patients would be waiting to have their blood drawn. After a few minutes, my name was called. So I walked up to the nurse and I showed her my bracelet. And then I proudly said, I just finished 6 sessions of chemotherapy and 15 sessions of radiation, hoping to lighten the mood. Most of the people whose blood she draws are in the middle of their treatment, and I wanted her to know that I was a healthy person, just like her. Upon reflection, I found it interesting that it was so important for me to tell that nurse that I was no longer a patient. And I wondered if perhaps I was still trying to convince myself. A little while later, my name was called. Pardon me. I was still trying to convince myself. My next stop was with the medical oncologist. While I waited, I observed several people sitting just outside the door leading to the chemotherapy infusion area. Studying the faces of these patients to empathize with them, I knew firsthand what they were going through. Still ingrained in my mind was what it felt like to sit outside that door and waiting for my name to be called, knowing that I was about to be injected with those powerful poisons was a terrible feeling. A little while later, my name was called, and a nurse with beautiful blonde hair led me into a side room and took my vital signs. I was displeased to learn that I had gained a little bit of weight. On one hand, it was a sign that I was healthy and I had a normal appetite, but on the other hand, it was a reminder that I still had a long road of recovery ahead of me. This day was the first time that I was going to meet my medical oncologist by myself. First time since my initial lymphoma diagnosis. For each prior visit, I always had my wife with me, my mother, and often my sister as well. And we would be all waiting for the doctor to come in and deliver life-changing news. While I waited for the doctor this day, I tried to imagine how he would react upon seeing me, as the last time we met, I looked completely different. Back then, I was much more pale, and I had no hair, and on both of those counts, I had made significant improvement. After a few minutes of waiting, the doctor walked in, and he greeted me with a big smile and a firm handshake, and then he sat down and took a deep breath. This man meant so much to me, and he remarked that I looked healthy and much better than he had remembered, and that made me feel wonderful. We talked about how I had been feeling, and he asked if I was experiencing any side effects from the radiation treatment, and I told him that I was not having any pain or tenderness in my skin, but I did show him that area on my chest where there was no hair growing. We talked about my blood tests from earlier that day, and he was happy to report that everything looked good, including my cholesterol levels. I then asked the doctor if we would be ordering another PET CT scan to see if there were new cancer cells growing. And he quickly said no. He explained that if the cancer comes back, I was definitely going to notice it with a lump on my body before some random scan. He emphasized just how fast the cancer cells of my type of aggressive lymphoma grow. He then went on to explain that there's actually more risk from the side effects of another PET CT scan than any benefit gained. He also explained that if the cancer does come back, it would likely be in a different part of my body than it was the first time, since I had radiation done to those areas. This was a sobering reminder of just how powerful the radiation therapy really was. Another thing the doctor said that made an impact on me was that I had to think about my prior chemotherapy treatment as a cardiac risk factor. Based on my current blood tests, including the cholesterol levels and other factors, I was at a low risk of heart attack or stroke. However, he emphasized that it was important for me to focus on my heart health as I grew older. It was paramount that I went forward with a new sense of appreciation for life, as well as a recognition that my body had been through an ordeal. My scars would take time to heal. He emphasized that it was really important to adjust my expectations about a post-chemotherapy and post-radiation life, and for me to respect the fact that I would never be the same again. On the way out the door, the doctor made sure to mention just how good I looked again, and that was a nice note to end the appointment on. Before heading home, I needed to get my pneumonia shot. This was something we had planned for months, and this was the day to do it. I was ready to get it over with, so I sat down in the waiting area, and my name was called. This time, I followed the nurse through a set of doors and back to the chemotherapy infusion area. As soon as I walked through those doors, all types of memories started rushing back. I encountered so many familiar smells, sights, and sounds. A flood of emotions washed over me as I was once again feeling like a vulnerable cancer patient at the mercy of the hospital, helpless and trapped as if I were hooked up to an IV machine. It was a really strange feeling to return to the scene of the crime, a place where I had been through a physically and emotionally harrowing experience. The nurse led me around a corner, down the hall, and then into a room before telling me to sit down in the chair. One of the exact same chairs that I sat in while receiving chemotherapy. It was horrible to be back there again so soon. Worried that there might have been a mistake, I made sure the nurse knew that I was not going to be receiving chemotherapy that day. And she told me that she knew, of course. As I looked around to take things in, I saw a much older woman with white frizzy hair laying in bed, partially hidden by a curtain. The way she was laying there reminded me of the way my grandmother looked just before she died. And I thought to myself, I was thankful that it was not my time yet, and I was sure glad that I was not in her shoes. In this strange place with all types of pain and suffering around me, the fact that I was going to be leaving soon gave me comfort. After a few more minutes of nervous waiting, a new nurse came in and finally administered that pneumonia shot. I was free to go. Near the elevator, I spotted one of the nurses who had taken care of me during my chemotherapy sessions, and she was just stunned to see me. She said I looked much more healthy than she had remembered, and that was wonderful to hear. It was a pleasure to come back and to see some of the people that had helped to treat me when I was sick, and to be able to show them of just how well I was doing now. With all that accomplished, I left the hospital that day with a wide open schedule, ready to enjoy my newfound freedom and appreciation for life. Next chapter is a new chapter begins. This is my battles with cancer, a patient and caregiver's candid memoir. I was a cancer patient. I'm a survivor now, and I was a caregiver. And I wrote this memoir as a way to help myself process my feelings, but also to help other people who are just getting diagnosed and have no idea what to expect, or people whose loved ones and friends and family get diagnosed and they're going to be a caregiver. So I wrote about that experience. It's available on Amazon. You can get the Kindle paperback. You can also get Audible and listen to the whole book. But I want to do it for free, so you can listen to the whole thing here on YouTube. And it's really important to me to get this book out to everyone. That's why I am doing this. And that's what this is, My Battles with Cancer. I've also published 2 more books, Trading Wisdom and Trading Quotes. You can check those books out. They are available on Amazon. So folks, thank you so much. This is My Battles with Cancer. I'll be back with another chapter soon. Take care.